Marcus felt the first drop hit his weathered cheek like a bullet. The sky had turned the color of old iron, and his prize bulls worth more than 3 houses in town stood grazing, unaware that hell itself was rolling across the horizon. He'd seen storms before, but this one whispered death. When lightning split the darkness and revealed 2 small faces pressed against a broken-down wagon window, Marcus knew his money was about to mean nothing at all. The wind carried more than rain. It carried screams. Marcus had been checking the fence line of his Diamond Creek ranch when the first thunder rolled across the valley like cannon fire. His Brahman bulls, each worth $15,000, grazed peacefully in the lower pasture, their massive forms dark against the golden grass. These weren't just cattle. They were his life's work, his legacy, his fortune walking on 4 legs. But the screams cut through everything. He spurred his horse toward the sound, his gut tightening with each step. Through the gathering gloom, he spotted it. An old covered wagon tilted at a dangerous angle in the creek bed. One wheel snapped clean off. A man with blood streaming down his face was trying desperately to unhitch 2 terrified horses while a woman's voice called out from inside. "Please, someone help us." The children, Marcus pulled up hard. The storm clouds were building into a wall of black fury that would unleash in minutes, not hours. His cattle were directly in the path, and if he didn't move them to higher ground now, the flash flood would sweep away everything he'd built. 5 generations of his family's sweat and sacrifice gone. But those voices in the wagon? The injured man looked up at him with desperate eyes. "Mister, my wife's about to have a baby, and we got 2 little ones trapped in there. Can you?" Oh, lightning split the sky, and in that brilliant flash, Marcus saw it all. His bulls in the distance, peaceful and doomed. The broken wagon with innocence inside, and the storm bearing down like God's own wrath. He had maybe 10 minutes to choose between his fortune and their lives. The thunder seemed to be counting down the seconds, and every beat of his heart felt like time slipping through his fingers like water. The rain started falling in fat, angry drops that turned dust to mud in seconds. Marcus made his choice without thinking, the kind of choice that comes from the gut, not the head. He swung down from his horse and helped the injured man free the horses while the woman's labor pains echoed from inside the wagon. "Name's Tom Bradley," the man gasped, wiping blood from a gash on his forehead. "This here's my wife Sarah, and we got Emma. She's 6, and little Billy. He's 4. Marcus Stone," he replied, already calculating. "We need to get you all to high ground. That creek's gonna rise 15 feet in the next hour." But when they tried to lift the wagon, the broken axle made it impossible. Sarah's cries were getting closer together, and through the canvas, Marcus could hear the children whimpering. The storm was no longer coming. It was here. The first real sheet of rain hit them like a cold slap. "My bulls," Marcus muttered, looking toward his herd. They were still grazing, trusting creatures who didn't know that death was riding the wind toward them. "What?" Tom asked. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. His prize bulls, his financial security, his father's dream, and his children's inheritance, all standing in the path of destruction while he tried to save strangers. The creek was already starting to rise, muddy water swirling around the wagon wheels. In the distance, he could see his foreman Jake riding hard toward the house, probably wondering where the hell Marcus had gone. As if reading his thoughts, Tom grabbed his arm. "You got somewhere else to be, don't you? Something important." Marcus looked at this stranger, this man who was giving him permission to leave. The honest thing would be to run, to save what could be saved. But looking into those desperate eyes, Marcus knew he'd lost something already, the chance to be the man who could walk away. The thunder rolled again, closer now, and with it came the realization that sometimes you don't choose between right and wrong. Sometimes you choose between 2 kinds of loss and pray you can live with what you pick. The smell of rain on hot earth always took Marcus back to the day his father died. He'd been 17 then, standing in this same pasture, watching their small herd while his father lay dying in the house behind them. "Son," the old man had whispered that last evening, "a ranch ain't just landing cattle. It's what you do when everything goes to hell that shows what kind of man you really are." Now, 30 years later, with Sarah Bradley screaming in pain inside that broken wagon and his own fortune standing in a flood path, those words hit him like a physical blow. "We need to move them now," Tom said, nodding toward his family. "Sarah can't wait much longer, and that water's rising fast." Marcus looked at his hands, the same hands that had built this ranch from nothing, that had delivered calves and mended fences and fought off rustlers. His father's hands. But what would his father do now? He remembered another storm when he was 12. A neighbor's horse had broken its leg in a gully, and his father had spent the whole night in the rain, trying to save it. They'd lost 2 calves to wolves that night because they weren't watching the herd. When Marcus had asked why they'd risked so much for someone else's horse, his father had said, "Because that's what neighbors do. Money comes and goes, son. But who you are when it matters, that stays forever." The thunder was constant now, a drum roll building to the main event. Through the rain, Marcus could barely make out his bulls in the distance. Jake would be looking for them both by now, probably cursing a blue streak and wondering if his boss had lost his mind. Sarah's cries were getting weaker, which scared him more than when they were strong. The children inside the wagon had gone quiet, never a good sign. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment and felt his father's presence in the storm wind. When he opened them again, he knew what the old man would say. "Boy, you can always make more money, but you can't unabandon people when they need you most." The choice was made. Had been made the moment he'd heard those children crying. Now all that was left was living with the consequences and praying he was half the man his father had raised him to be. The creek had become a river, and the river was hungry. Marcus and Tom managed to rig a makeshift stretcher from wagon boards and rope. But moving Sarah in her condition was like defusing a bomb. One wrong move, and everything could go to hell. The children clung to their mother, wide-eyed and silent with terror. "The baby's coming now," Sarah gasped between contractions. I can't hold it back anymore." That's when Marcus saw them as prize bulls, moving restlessly in the pasture as the water began to rise around their hooves. Lightning illuminated their massive forms, and he could see Jake on horseback, trying desperately to herd them toward higher ground. But it was too late. The flood was coming too fast. "Mr. Stone," Jake's voice carried over the wind. "The bulls. We're gonna lose them all." Marcus felt something tear inside his chest. 40 years of work, his children's college funds, his retirement, his father's dream, all of it about to be swept away while he delivered a stranger's baby in a storm. "Go," Sarah whispered, somehow reading his face even through her pain. "Save what you can." "No." The word came out harder than he'd intended. "I'm serious. We'll make do. People like us always do. But those animals, lady, you don't understand." Marcus knelt beside the stretcher, rain running down his face like tears. "Those bulls are worth more money than I'll see again in this lifetime. But you know what? I watched my father choose neighbors over profit once, and it made him the richest man I ever knew. Not in money, in something that mattered more." Tom stared at him. "You're really gonna stay?" "I'm gonna stay, and I'm gonna deliver your baby, and I'm gonna get your family to safety. And if that costs me everything I own, then so be it." The storm screamed its fury, and in the distance, Marcus saw his beautiful bulls beginning to panic as the water rose past their legs. Jake was shouting something, but the words were lost in thunder. Sarah grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "What's your middle name?" "What?" "Your middle name." "I want to give it to the baby." Marcus felt his throat close up. "James, after my father." Then, baby James Bradley is going to know exactly who saved his life tonight. The contraction hit her then. The big one, and Marcus Stone, who'd lost everything he'd ever worked for in the space of one night, discovered he'd never felt richer in his entire life. The baby cried at 2:47 a.m. just as the storm began to break. Marcus had delivered calves before, but never a human child, and never in the middle of a disaster. Little James Bradley came into the world red-faced and furious. And when Marcus heard that first wail, he felt something inside him that he'd never experienced, a pure, clean joy that had nothing to do with profit or loss. Sarah was exhausted but smiling. Tom sat holding his other children, all of them huddled together in the abandoned line shack where they'd taken shelter. The creek was still raging outside, and in the growing light of dawn, Marcus could see the devastation. His prize bulls were gone, all of them, swept away in the flood or scattered to God knows where. 40 years of careful breeding, of building something from nothing, washed away in a single night. Jake appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, looking like he'd aged 10 years. "Boss, I'm sorry. We lost everything." "Every last head." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd known. Had known the moment he'd chosen to stay with the Bradleys. "Any of the hands hurt?" "No, sir. We all made it to high ground. But the ranch ... "Oh, Marcus, I don't know how we're going to come back from this." Neither did Marcus. The banknote was due in 6 months, and without the cattle, he had nothing to sell. The ranch that had been in his family for 5 generations might die with him. Baby James made a soft sound, and Sarah smiled. "Mr. Stone, Marcus, I know what this cost you. How do we ever repay something like that?" Marcus looked at this tiny family, safe and together because of choices he'd made in the dark. The baby's small fist was wrapped around his finger with a grip stronger than any handshake he'd ever received. "You don't," he said quietly. You raise that boy right. You tell him that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes that's exactly what makes it worth doing." Outside, the storm was moving on, but Marcus Stone felt like he was standing at the edge of a different kind of precipice, one where he had to figure out who he was going to be now that everything he thought he knew about himself had been washed away with the flood. 3 months later, Marcus was mending fence when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. The Diamond Creek Ranch looked different, now smaller, humbler, but somehow more honest. He'd kept the house and 20 acres, sold the rest to pay debts. Jake and most of the hands had found work elsewhere, though they'd all promised to come back if things ever turned around. The dust cloud resolved into a convoy of trucks and trailers, and Marcus's heart skipped when he recognized the lead vehicle. Tom Bradley climbed out of the cab, grinning like a man with a secret. "Heard you might need some livestock," Tom called out. Marcus walked over, confused. "Tom, what are you? Remember that baby you delivered?" "Well, turns out his great-aunt had a ranch up in Colorado. Left it to Sarah when she passed last month. 300 head of prime Angus, a dozen bulls, and a business that's been looking for a partner who knows what he's doing." Sarah appeared with baby James in her arms, the boy now fat and happy and reaching for everything within his grasp. "We talked it over, Marcus. You saved our lives. Now maybe we can save yours." "I can't accept." "It's not charity," Tom interrupted. "It's partnership, 50-50. You bring the experience, we bring the cattle. But there's one condition." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "We named the operation Stone Bradley Ranch, and every year on James's birthday, we tell the story of the night a good man chose people over profit and found out that sometimes the best investments can't be measured in dollars." Marcus looked at the trucks full of cattle, at this family who'd become more than friends, at baby James reaching tiny hands toward him. He thought about his father, about choices made in storms, about what it really meant to be rich. "Well," he said slowly, taking the baby's offered hand, "I reckon we better get these cattle settled before dark. Got a feeling this is going to be the beginning of something pretty special." As the sun set over Diamond Creek, Marcus Stone discovered that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to find everything you actually need. And sometimes the best legacy isn't the one you leave behind. It is the one you help create for others. The thunder had passed, but the man it left behind was someone his father would have been proud to know.